Hey, welcome to another episode of Sidekick TV. Today I'm joined by James Gallagher from Payroll Intelligence. So James actually works within our office and has been developing a payroll software system. Although actually I say payroll software, it's not really processing payroll, is it? James, can you tell us a bit please about Payroll Intelligence?
Sure thing, Rick. Well, yeah, thanks very much for the intro. Payroll Intelligence, we essentially assess what payroll should have been. You might call it historical arrears, sins of the past, in terms of what has been calculated correctly or what's been not calculated correctly.
Right, okay. So it's not processing payroll, it's auditing payroll, is that correct?
That's basically it, yep. So you've got any number of payroll vendors, your timestamp in and out, etc., etc. Our software is designed to go back in and take a look at those records compressed against the complicated legislation that is the Holidays Act. So it's essentially, I'll use your term, auditing. Auditing the accuracy, the compliance of those in-house calculations versus what the Holidays Act says should have happened.
Right. So
a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah. So nearly all of our clients will recommend that they use payroll software. Okay, there's a number of really good ones out there, also a number of really bad ones. If you've got a good payroll software, can we just forget about this? We don't need to audit it?
You probably can. If you've also got to consider, there's a couple of variables. If you've got a good payroll software, you've probably still got someone sitting at the keyboard punching things in. Right. So when we consider the immovable object that is the Holidays Act, was the payroll software perfect? It might well have been. Was the person punching the data in perfect? Maybe not. And as you rightly pointed out, not all payroll softwares are created equal. Some of them, for some people out there, you're paying $5 per head per month. You're maybe not getting a Ferrari for $5 a month. And for some employment conditions, the application of the Act is very tricky for some employees. And some softwares, pains us to say it, just simply aren't up to the task as well. And the horrible part of it is that someone sitting in the driver's seat would have no idea whether it's going right or going wrong this whole time. Yeah.
And when you talk about it going wrong, what are you saying? What happens when it goes wrong?
Typically, well, Holidays Act, the name, the clues are there from the outset. It's holiday pay. Let's zoom in maybe on your annual holidays. There's a couple of complicated calculations which need to be run at that time. Quite simply, if you take a day off and you should have been paid X, but instead they paid you Y, straight away you've got a rift. You've got a rift between what you should have been paid. Maybe it's only $10 an hour for a day, you're short $80. Yeah. No one's going to lose too much sleep over that. But the nature of the Holidays Act is that you need to use previous numbers to fuel future calculations. So if you're out by 80 one day, next time you take holidays, it's 85. It's 90, it's 120, and the snowball rolls and rolls and rolls.
And who's entitled to that money? So let's consider it, I'm an employer, I've been paying people, I've got it wrong. This example you just say, $85, 5 years ago, the employee has left. What might I find out at a later date then from that?
You might find out that the employee was probably owed at least $80. Generally, we would leave certain conversations to the specialist lawyers, but generally you would say that, look, this is a minimum entitlement under the law. This isn't someone coming back from the dead to have a bit of a cash grab, just like they're entitled to have lunch and entitled to not be chained to the building. They're entitled to be paid correctly as well. And whilst it's difficult at the time, it's even more difficult to retrospectively go back and figure out what should have been happening, but it's still an entitlement. Yeah. And most times that will be money that is due in one way, shape or form to an employee.
Right, okay. And due at any point, and you're probably better off finding out and telling the employee, I should have paid you this.
It's a much better scenario, probably for all parties, but particularly for employers, to find out first. What's at stake with all of this whole topic? Because it's rife. Even the high up organisations who are almost the guardians of this topic, MBIE, there's all sorts of different organisations everyone's heard about in the news. It's rife in terms of who's been doing this wrong. It's very important, no matter who the organisation is, to find out first. What's at stake is perhaps more the narrative than it is the dollars. If you find out as an employee Well, you owe me $80. Oh, wait, you can cut me a check. Whereas if the employer finds out, they can say, look, Rick, yeah, we made a foul up a few years back. We owe you this amount of money. Look, we don't just have this laying around, and we didn't know this was coming. There's been a cheeky wee pandemic come and go since then. Can we pay you off over a certain amount of time? So I'm sure the accountants would also say that's good for the balance sheet. We leave the accountants to have that conversation, but it means that you can control the engagement. You don't have to just frantically get the wallet out of the back pocket. There's more avenues, more options if the employer finds out first.
Perfect. And then it takes me on then, so, why can you guys do this, whereas accountants, payroll administrators, software providers for years have been getting this wrong? Like, what's under the bonnet of your software that can do this?
Sure. So I suppose where it comes from is it's almost like a gap between wicketkeeper and first slip. It's a gap right there between legal and accounting. This is the Holidays Act. This is a piece of legislation. But as you point out, the lawyers probably have better things to do than run numbers all day. But equally, it's not necessarily in the wheelhouse of an accounting firm. So we have built completely bespoke software here in New Zealand. This isn't being done by an IT sweatshop somewhere overseas. Built here in New Zealand to essentially fill that void between legal and accounting. So we often work with those firms and those specialties. A legal firm comes and says, "Can you run the numbers?" Or an accounting firm says, "Would you care to cast a second opinion on this?" And we feed it back out to those entities as well. So it's a friendly enough conversation. We've just got the software that fills that gap.
Yeah, cool. And you'd mentioned earlier as well, so it's like machine learning, isn't it? So you've got some artificial intelligence in there? Or?
Yeah, I'm sure the IT boffins would stop me short of calling it artificial intelligence, but it's machine learning. So the technology that we're building now, I use the snowball metaphor. The more and more we put through it, the smarter and smarter it gets. Like, it's programmed to be pretty darn smart from the outset, but it continues to grow and evolve, which is important because so too does the legislation. We've got impending changes, which is a bit of a reset button in some regards, but we still need to be able to push through big volumes and now potentially straddling two sets of law.
Yeah, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, so really, that's why there's an opportunity now, hey, that you can actually do this because we've got new tech that runs the numbers, does it quicker, it's learning, getting faster and faster. You're not getting people to look through 20 years of ledger books.
You would have struggled to do this even up until a couple of years ago. Don't get me wrong, a lot of firms have done these exercises and done their best to figure out what they owe their staff, but the costs of doing those projects, it has been inaccessible for a lot of employers, certainly inaccessible for a lot of employees. You're not going to spend $5,000 with a lawyer and an accountant only to be told you're owed $50. So the advent of technology makes it much more efficient. It's much more cost effective. So there's a voice now given to employees and employers who might not have otherwise had access to the solutions.
Yeah, perfect. No, that's great. Hey, thank you so much, James. That's great. It's like exciting to hear about this new technology, even though it's an area of business that might not get most people hot under the collar. But you certainly know about this stuff when it goes wrong. So no, it's a great solution. Thank you very much, James.
Thanks, Rick.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.